Well, welcome to Round Hill Radio, the podcast from Round Hill Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
How you doing?
So far, so good. How about yourself?
Great. I'm doing well. The rainy weather kind of has me looking for sunshine in other places.
Here's hoping you'll find it.
Thank you. I like that we start each podcast, I feel like, with like a weather report.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're still smiling and laughing, so
It's okay. Yeah.
you found some sunshine somewhere.
Everybody listening is like, that was yesterday, guys.
Yeah.
We're very current, everybody. We're very current.
It's all good.
So what are we talking about today?
Connection.
Connection.
Yeah.
That's a nice idea.
I think so. I think that was your word, actually. But
Super.
well, I guess the word connection is in the air because we are reconnecting. And I've seen all kinds of examples in local congregations and in and actually in many other ways of people starting to come together again.
Yeah.
And, book groups at the library and special, gatherings here and there. That's been really exciting to see. And the thing that I notice is that much connection is making people hungry for more connection.
Yeah.
So when I've attended some different small groups in the last few weeks with a variety of people, the common thread has always been, so what's next?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Like, this was great. This felt wonderful. It felt so nourishing. What can we do next?
Yeah.
And people are starting to get creative with that.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So kind of small group things, right?
Small groups. And I think there is such power in small groups. I think the church especially has kind of gotten in this rut over the years that, how do we make ourselves as big as possible?
Right.
Rather than, small can be just perfect and can be more, more than enough. I had a friend who taught at Hartford Seminary for many years, Carl Dudley, who was a really remarkable man, a great teacher. But his great theme, he worked with so-called small churches, which is funny because most churches are small now.
Yeah.
But he said, small churches are the right size. And so he wanted people to stop feeling a low sense of self-esteem. And I was actually part of a group that's doing some social advocacy work on a particular issue. And one of the questions that came up is they were working with someone who's an expertise in the field that they're, addressing. And they said, so how can we grow larger? He said, you know what? You're big enough right now to have a huge impact.
Wow.
And he was talking with about 8 people. So I think that this is what we're discovering. If you put 8 people around a table to eat, to discuss, to think about something, just enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
Great things can happen.
I mean, it's worth saying that most dinner tables kind of tap out at 8.
They do.
Right? That's kind of the optimal dinner party size. And you have to start bringing in all sorts of random chairs.
Exactly. Can get dangerous at that point.
Right. Well, and I mean, no kidding. And I think about, with COVID and everything, that beyond that, it almost starts to feel perhaps a little uncomfortably large, at least for me. And I'm not used to spending time in a large group.
Right.
I don't love crowds anyways, on the best of times.
Yeah.
And during the worst of times, I definitely don't want to be around crowds. So I feel like, to me, like a perfect evening is conversation in a small group. Because I feel like you get deeper in your conversation and in your connection.
Yeah. I think there's an optimal size for groups. I've often heard the figure 12 to 15, that's kind of the large size of things.
Yeah.
And I think that 12 to 15 is a nice group for some of us who are on the introverted side of things. It's like just large enough that we can kind of sneak away.
Yeah.
Sure. Sort of go to the edges of the group. But for extroverts, there's room, and the smallness of it can kind of soften the edges a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that, historically, there's always been such power in small groups meeting to decide that they're going to make a big impact on the world, and then they sort of launch their efforts from there. But there's a trust in the size of the group.
Right.
So that's been fun. I mentioned to you earlier that there was a theologian whose name was John Taylor. And John Taylor was a really remarkable leader in the Church of England. He was a bishop. He was also a playwright. And so he was an artist. He had all these different sides to him. But he liked to think of congregations as being composed of little congregations. And so that, his observation over the years is that when people would come and join a congregation, actually what they joined was a little congregation. They would become part of a special interest group or a committee or something like that where they felt like they'd been called. And I think that's going to come back now. I think people are feeling that they want to be really choosy about their groups and their causes, right? Because we've had a long, hard time of it, and we don't want to feel like we're extending ourselves into a small group experience that's not going to be rewarding in some way.
Sure.
So that's very positive, and I have noticed a big change in people coming to churches, and I think this is true in probably many communities of faith, but when people are coming now, they're asking the question, how can this group or this congregation support my spiritual journey?
Right.
So they're asking that question first, and rather than, what committee can I serve on?
Yeah.
Tends not to be the opener.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's tempting when we have situations that we need, we see someone who's clearly cares and wants to participate, and you're like, oh, you could really participate.
Totally. Yeah.
It's a little.
Have we got a place for you?
Yeah, we can get a little aggressive.
We can. We're learning to just dial that down quite a bit.
Yes.
Step away from that.
Yes. Even in the AGO, we're looking at like dialing down the volunteer, just sheer numbers that we need, air quote need, to keep things moving, because it's draining.
It's draining.
Yeah.
It's so funny you use that word, because I heard someone else use that word just yesterday, that they just felt drained by the whole experience of being in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And this is a person who's had a lot of deep involvement in the life of the church over many, many, many years, but just feels right now that, this has taken too much. And so this individual kind of has to just kind of step back a little bit and reappraise things.
Sure.
But that's where the small group comes in, because to be part of a group of people who are supportive and encouraging. There's a story that I've told in the past about one of my cousins who was very involved with his family in the life of a large church in the Midwest, and his wife had died, and so my comment to him was, wow, you must have gotten a lot of support from your congregation, over the years. You've been so involved. And he said, not so much, actually. He said, the group that really supported me were the group of guys he drank coffee with every morning at McDonald's at 8:00.
Oh, that's
and so
lovely,
they'd go
though.
down there, and, they'd all be there kind of ribbing each other and joking around, right? Talking about the football game on the weekend or whatever it was.
Right.
And he got so much from that group. And some of those men had been through his experience and gave him advice and counsel as he needed it. They didn't force anything on him. I really love that story. And I was so glad that he found that place.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's, I guess the other side of it is not all groups have to be formed and planned.
Right.
Right?
We can be spontaneous.
Stumble into them.
Yeah. It makes me think of British pub culture of like meeting everybody like down at the pub. It's like a gathering place, like whatever your gathering place is with, kind of similar people with similar experiences or not.
Yep.
And that's kind of interesting. Is that kind of like the Cheers of England.
Right.
Right.
I love that example, because you never know who might be there on a given night.
Yeah.
Right. And so you show up and suddenly you're rubbing elbows with somebody you hadn't thought you were going to meet.
I mean, having a conversation, drinking beer, and playing darts sounds like a great night. I'm just going to say.
Soothing in some way.
That
right?
sounds so fun. Just like the relaxed nature, just like everybody spending time together, conversation.
Yeah.
Talking about the footy or whatever.
That's right.
I watch a lot of British television, sorry.
I know. I think we all are watching, a lot of people are watching a lot of British television right now.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Our language is changing without us even knowing it.
I'm okay with that. That works for me. It's funny too, because just yesterday, Gus and I were talking, he was telling me about the blue zones of the world. Have you heard this? This was new to me. This idea of blue zones where people live remarkably longer lives than in other places.
Okay.
I had heard of that, but not that they were called blue zones.
Same.
And he was saying, you would think it would be, what's the dominant factor, right? So he was saying, you think it would be like great amount of time spent outdoors or exercise or really healthy diets. And he made sure to tell me, no, they do to eat bread in these places. But the dominant feature of these blue zones is time and connection with community.
Wow.
That these people have a strong sense of community, and that in of itself seems to be the factor that joins these different blue zones of the world. This idea that people are living in community and have strong connections to each other.
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight. Because, you think about the things that might normally come to mind, what's the state of healthcare and whatever education and all those things. And here it's just the human connection that matters most. Yeah, that's lovely. I think as someone who, over the years has struggled with introversion, that I tell people I've become a trained extrovert. Probably most pastors are trained extroverts.
Yeah.
Maybe directors of music too.
No, I'm definitely an extrovert.
You got a running start. That's not fair.
Yeah,
so.
I did. Sorry. Most of them are. I'm not normal. As we know, I'm not normal. But in this, I am also not normal as an organist. Most organists are very.
Fair enough.
Because, especially, it's not even necessarily directors of music, but organists, because we all spend time alone in practice rooms. I will say, I'll divert to a really funny story really quickly because it makes me giggle so hard, that at the ISM at Yale, there's a practice hallway. So you have your key and you unlock the door, and then doors on each side. So there's 4 practice organs. I think there were 2 practice pianos on the end. And so we'd all, some people would have practice at their churches or whatever. I was working in Westport, so it was like a half an hour away. So I'd practice up at the ISM.
Yep.
So with my friend Matt. So we did this thing where we would practice for 45 minutes, and then we'd watch an episode of I Love Lucy.
Oh.
And then we go back to practice.
Art
and then we'd watch
community and entertainment all blended together.
It was great.
Oh my gosh.
And it made my extrovert heart, because I was like, I cannot sit by myself. I have a hard stop. At 45 minutes, I start to get restless. At an hour and a half, I cannot be in a room by myself any longer. I cannot just sit there and get all fidgety. It's like social withdrawal or something. And I cannot sit by myself for that long. So he would save me from myself every 45 minutes with an episode of some retro television show. It was great.
That's actually a really good thing to know about yourself, that you have those kinds of experiences.
And I used to fight it for a really long time and feel really bad about it, because as a musician, you're expected to practice 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day.
Sure.
And I realized I could not do that in one stretch. If people just sit down and play and play and play and play and play, I just can't.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? If I get that much over the course of a day, how is that? It's not any different.
Sure.
Right? I'm still getting the work done.
That's right.
So.
Well, it's great that I really do think it's great that you know that about yourself, though, because our tendency is to tend to push through, right?
Yeah.
We just keep following whatever the dominant picture is in our mind.
Yeah. Of what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as my friend Heather said in grad school, don't should yourself.
No kidding.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah. One of the best things anyone's ever said to me. She's very wise.
Nice. Well, I think that for the times in my life, off and on, when I feel like, I really don't necessarily want to go to this gathering, or I really don't want to be part of this group or whatever.
Sure.
That by and large, when I go afterwards, I've said, that felt great.
Good.
And I think that's the healing part of connection. It may not feel great initially.
Sure.
You kind of have to turn the wheel a little bit to get it moving in the right direction. But I often find that once I'm part of a group and enjoyed an evening together, that by the time it's done, I'm always thinking this was such a great thing to do. And so the more we can help each other to create those experiences, especially as we head into the winter, the better off we'll be.
Well, I think too, for you, I wonder, because being a pastor, I feel like is kind of an identity. And I feel like there's sort of an unspoken expectation of how you show up to social gatherings. That isn't just it's Leslie showing up. No, it's the Reverend Dr. Ed Horseman is here.
Good heavens.
Right?
Save us. Run now.
But do you think about that? Or are there
I have been mercifully oblivious to that
Oh,
over the years.
I'm sorry. Did I ruin it?
No, it's all good.
Okay.
It's all good.
Sorry.
No, it kind of was one of those things that definitely surfaces from time to time.
Sure.
Like it'll like drift in from the outer space of consciousness back in like, oh gosh, I wonder what people are expecting of me right now.
Yeah.
But I've been, for whatever reason, I've always been able to kind of send it along its way.
That's great.
Yeah, I think I was very fortunate early on in my experience of ministry to have people who reminded me to do that. Like, just don't let that matter.
Yeah.
But it is an issue for people sometimes. And this is kind of a funny aside. When I was training at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, there was a professor of speech and drama. So we used to have to take voice lessons.
Excellent.
Yes. And Bob Seaver was the teacher. He became a very dear friend. He was a remarkable man who taught at Union for over half a century. Wow. And so his class, interestingly enough, to your point, was called Freeing the Natural Voice, because so many preachers would step into a pulpit and completely change the way they spoke.
Yeah.
And he would say, I listened to you down in the hallway the other day, and what you're doing now is not what I heard down there. What happened to that voice?
Right.
What happened to that person?
Yeah.
And it's that dreaded pastoral identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's one way of saying that can be the downside of being in groups, is that you do think about identity,
right,
and you feel like you can't really be yourself, and then that's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because you're not showing up authentically.
Exactly.
I guess, and then you're kind of like, you get caught in this
whatever that weird identity is.
Yeah.
Don't get caught there.
It's funny. It makes me think of how Shakespeare was done maybe like 30, 40 years ago. There's been a huge style change in Shakespeare performances, because it was like, I am doing Shakespeare and I shall have this voice.
Right.
And it was cringy.
And everybody's with their backs against the wall looking.
Yeah, and like the da 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 da. I was like, oh. Actually, Kenneth Branagh and all of his work with that like really transformed how it's performed and how it's filmed and everything. That's just as an aside I wanted to share.
I'm glad you did.
Thanks. I went to Shakespeare camp as a kid.
Oh, this is more than I really wanted to know.
Sorry.
Shakespeare camp. That is, talk about care and connection.
Isn't that something? It was great.
I'll bet it was.
Well, because it was like, I got into this, I mean, basically it was nerd camp. They had us all take the SAT as like 8th graders or something, 8th graders, 9th graders. And if you do well,
God forbid,
blah, blah, blah. And so it was like, you could go and do like calculus, which I was never going to do. And there was like computer programming, which I kind of wish I'd done now. But then like the only artsy thing was Shakespeare.
Wow.
But it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And we studied it and we performed it, and it was,
what an opportunity.
It was super cool.
Of course, it sounds, super cool now, but a lot of...
Yeah. I mean, I was never going to be the cool kid. I learned that pretty early, so I let that go.
You're doing fine.
Also, I learned that drama kids have no patience for like the cool kids, which was great. You learn to let that go, and then it's like their own clique.
You find a niche.
You do.
Right?
Yeah. Because, I mean, let's be honest, I wasn't going to find organists.
Right.
There was one other organist in my hometown that was my age.
Wow.
Yeah. I saw him like every 3 years or something.
You have to create those little congregations.
Nice. Looping it back. But that's what it is, right? It's like finding people that you can connect with on a deeper level than just like, hi, how you doing?
Yeah, I know. And I've always admired, I will say, people who have found those groups that eventually they become friends and they become really tight, and over the years they become such great support, for each other, and sometimes reach out to the wider world. It's really remarkable. But again, it all goes back to the power of a small group to change the lives of the people in it and the world around them.
Well, and I feel like a church can be such a great opportunity to make friends and make connection, because I feel like, a lot of friends I made, in college or grad school, because you're literally in a group with like-minded people who are doing something that you are passionate about and you're all passionate about it together. So you can have that connection.
Yes.
And that innate like understanding of each other. Like it wasn't until I was in college truly that I sort of was surrounded by people who were as passionate about music and just sort of lived this identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't the weird kid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was such an amazing thing. And so now as it all, so many of us are in our post-school years, it's like, how do you make friends?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like you don't necessarily like want to go to a bar because that's kind of something else.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like adult sports maybe, but like a church is such a wonderful place when there's so many people with so many different points of view, especially
Interests.
this place, which I love, and interests. And I think it's a really great place to find your people, as we say.
Yeah. And, I've had, over the years, I've met newcomers who've come to the congregation, for the first or second time and have said, is there a group here for such and such? And I've always found the best answer for that is there may not be now, but if you think you might like to start one or get to know people until you find out whether there might be an interest in common, come and be part of an exploration and see if that's going to happen.
That's fun.
Yeah, and it can be fun, I think, when people find that. It's been always such a gift to me over the years when I've met people in congregations who will say, I've known people here for 40 years or 50 years, and we traveled together, we've eaten meals together, we shared stories together. That makes life very, very rich. And I think we're at the point again where we're becoming hungry for that kind of community.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being part of our community. Even though we don't get to be in all the same places, we are grateful for you and grateful for your presence and participating in these programs that we do. So we hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Round Till Radio.